Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, one of the key issues before the General Assembly is transportation issues, and then we're going to have prominent State Senator Jay Costa, a Democrat from Allegheny County, on the program to talk about some big issues before the Senate. But first, Rick Bloomingdale, he's the president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, and we'll get to Mr. Bloomingdale after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, joining me, sitting across from me, is Rick Bloomingdale. He's the president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Rick is here. We're going to talk a little bit about transportation funding. I don't think there's it's one of the three huge issues confronting the state, what to do about it. I want to get his view on it. Then if we have some time, we're going to talk about liquor privatization as well, an issue that's moving before the General Assembly. All right, Rick, how many commissions do we need that say we got to do something about transportation funding? And it seems, and you cover this all the time, as though Democrats and Republicans are saying it needs to be done. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely right. And the fact, that they needed a commission, all you have to do is drive on the roads of Pennsylvania. Yeah. You know we need to do transportation funding. It creates so many jobs, but it's the lifeblood of our businesses, right? I mean, I'm the labor guy, and the business guys do their side, but we want to move those goods. And when they're produced in the factories of Pennsylvania and stored at the warehouses, we want those folks to be moving those goods across the roads, the ports, the airports, the rails. We want those goods moving because that's jobs for Pennsylvanians.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with, we got some basics down. I don't think there's any doubt, and I'm neutral on this program, but I've doing the research, there isn't any doubt that Pennsylvanians say we've got to do this. We go around, every study says we've got not just an economic issue, with the economy, but we also have a safety issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more these things deteriorate, you hit a pothole, it makes your car veer, which could cause accidents. I mean, we saw that horrible accident on the turnpike where the young lacrosse coach was killed. Our transportation system needs repaired, and safety is a huge issue.
If you were in the General Assembly and the issue was before you in terms of how you would pay for it, do you have any ideas about that? I mean, there's a bunch of them that are in play. Why don't you go through a couple of them that you think might work?
Well, there's the oil tax and the wholesale tax, and they're talking about raising that. Of course, there's the gas tax that has always traditionally funded road repairs. But there's an interesting thing going on. As we get more fuel-efficient cars, the fuel tax revenues go down. So how do you, do you change that to a mileage tax rather than a fuel tax? Because you can't, you could add more to the fuel tax.
I'm going to stop you here. That's a really important point that I don't think has been made enough, that we conceivably will take in less money because who knows where we're going to go with maybe natural gas in cars, and we have it now, whether that can work out, electric cars, etc. But we also base it on the gas purchase, not on the miles that we drive. Re-emphasize that point, because I think that's a really important point.
Absolutely, and that gets more to the usage, right? The amount of gas you use doesn't tell you how many miles you drive.
Yeah.
So those big diesels that traditionally have gotten fuel efficient, they're putting a lot of wear and tear on the roads, and they're paying their fair share. But as the engines get more efficient, that weight is still going to deteriorate the roads. So you've got to figure out another way to do it more on use rather than, and miles driven may be the way to do that.
I've seen lawmakers say things that I never thought I'd hear them say, and they're actually concerned about bridges. I mean, they're structurally sound, we hear all of that, but I mean, talking about the possibility that we could have a serious bridge collapse. Is that out of the question?
No, it's not. I mean, look what happened in Minnesota 7-8 years ago. I can't remember when that was, but there was one of our interstate highway bridges. Right. We got the best system in the world, but it's old. It was built in the 50s. That's now, I mean, seems not too long ago to me, but it's now 60 years ago, right? And so our bridges have incredible strain. Plus, you know, in the Marcellus area, those big trucks constantly going over them is putting additional strain. So
all right, I'm talking with Rick Bloomingdale. We're going to run to a break. When I come back, I'm going to ask Mr. Bloomingdale's position on liquor privatization. I think I know what this is, but we'll let you know when we come back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hey, welcome back to the program with Rick Bloomingdale. He's the president of Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. All right, let's talk a little liquor privatization. Moving through the legislature. The bill now is a hybrid. It would call for privatization over time. It's complicated. You can get into whatever parts you want. Organized labor is not in favor of this privatization. Why not?
Well, a couple of reasons. There's public safety issues. There's the jobs issue. We think that laying off 5,000 people and throwing them out of work, out of good paying jobs with health care benefits and pensions, is not the right way to build the middle class. So putting these people out of work so somebody has a little bit extra convenience, I think most Pennsylvanians would say, well, we would want to keep people working. So I think it's important that we look at the jobs issue, but it's also a public safety issue. You know, we've got plenty of studies that show that, you know, when you have a controlled system like we do, one of the things that folks do in the liquor stores is check IDs. Yeah. You can't, when you're moved by the profit motive, sometimes that profit overcomes your best judgment in checking an ID, and that doesn't happen in the state liquor stores. It's all about making sure the customer gets a good service and protecting public safety.
Yeah, I mean, what about this debate that, the aspect of the debate that says the state doesn't belong in this business, that in, you know, you pick the number, 48 states, wholesale and retail is all, it may be divided, may be privatized. In only 2 states is it completely controlled by the state, that it's anachronistic, that the state shouldn't be in this business.
Well, you know, everything happens in cycles, and I actually believe that more and more states, probably as alcoholism takes off and we're seeing an increase in binge drinking, we're seeing folks more interested in like regulating drugs rather than just outlawing them. You know, we did the prohibition thing, but keeping control on a dangerous substance like alcohol, which has caused so many divorces and deaths. And
that used to be a Republican point of view, may I point out. I remember during the debates that took place during Governor Thornburg and Governor Ridge, Republican lawmakers used to stand up and make these arguments.
And Paul Clymer still does, but you know, if somebody, and before I was a father, it was less important, as a father in looking at what's happening in our college campuses, and it just seems to be where we should keep good control over it. And I think absolutely the state belongs in the business.
Before I let you go, what do you think the prospects are? I mean, Republicans control the legislature. They have 27 votes. They need 26 to pass a bill. You've got this hybrid out there and it's obviously going to get tweaked in the Senate. Do you think this is something that will pass? I mean, or is it just we just don't know? Well,
we're hoping it doesn't, obviously, but it is close enough that we don't, you know, any emolument or you know, let's build a bridge over, you know, the kinds of things that happen in the legislature, a little bit of horse trading. You know, we hope people stand on their principles, but we hope to defeat it.
Okay, Rick Bloomingdale here with us. Coming up, Senator Jay Costa, a Democrat from Allegheny County. We'll get his views on a bunch of these important issues before the legislature following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, joining me is Senator Jay Costa. He's from Allegheny County. He represents the 43rd District. Last week he's a Democrat, by the way. Last week we had Senator Brubaker. He's a Republican. We're doing our nonpartisan thing on the program. Welcome, Senator.
Terry, thanks for having me today.
All right. I talked last week about Senator Brubaker's bill on, sort of dealing with charitable institutions. That was his issue. I want to give you a chance, as I like to do, to talk about something that you're working on, your caucus is working on. Make your case for what issue you think is really important.
I think clearly the most significant issue in Pennsylvania today, all across this Commonwealth, is the issue of how we're going to grow jobs in this Commonwealth. Right. When we look to our unemployment rate, we see that we are now well above the national average. We're creeping above it. When this administration took over, we were about 1.5 points below the national average. Today, we're about 0.5 point above it, a 2-point swing. When we look at the number of jobs created in Pennsylvania compared to what's being created in New Jersey and in New York and Maryland, they're blowing us away. We went from 8th to 43rd during this administration. So we have to take steps to try to grow jobs in this economy.
Give me 3 or 4 things.
A couple of things that we can do. I think one of the things we can do is begin to have a conversation about transportation funding and bring that to closure. We should have had that conversation 2 years ago. We did not. But I think clearly that does 2 things. It provides for safety for our motorists who use our roads and our bridges in particular, but also adds through the mass transit investments.
And that's bipartisan.
There's clearly it's bipartisan and bicameral. It's just the administration has not been able to bring that issue to closure. We hope that we get that done as we go forward. We also think there are other areas we can make investments. We need to go back and making investments into those programs that work. Those job creation, economic development programs have been very, very successful in growing jobs. More investments into our Ben Franklin program, probably one of the best economic development programs we have around. Investments in things like business in our sites. Very successful programs under the Rendell administration. Those are the type of things that we need to do. We need to address the business tax climate here in Pennsylvania. It needs to be more fair. It needs to be a balanced business tax approach. We look to do things like addressing the whole issue of the Delaware loophole, closing the combined reporting. Those are just examples of some of the things that we can do. And finally, making investments. We propose putting together what's called an infrastructure investment bank by using resources and through programs that are not working as well as they should or not being utilized. And the ones that aren't working, capture those dollars, put them into an investment bank, and then start to drive out loans and grants to allow our community to start to grow again. So on the job side, that's where we think we need to be.
Yeah. A big debate that took place when you did the Marcellus Shale legislation, you did an impact fee, was whether there should be a severance tax. There was an argument that I think most other states that have natural gas have a severance tax. You'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. And is there any prospect for looking at that again, or do you think that debate over Marcellus Shale has come and gone?
Yeah, my hope is that we do have continued conversation about the investments that are being made by the natural gas companies who are drilling here. For the most part, though, I think there are a number of other issues that have taken center stage or are on the front burner, and that conversation, I think, in light of what has been done, has sort of been pushed to the back. We think there's more capacity, that we should have captured more revenue from the companies. We didn't do that. Most of our members, the majority of our members voted against the Marcellus impact fee proposal, but we think there's an opportunity for us to be able to re-examine that. But for the most part, I think it's on the back burner for now.
I noticed that within the Democratic ranks anyway, divisions in both parties, that you also had this division about the whole Marcellus Shale entity, the natural gas drilling itself. Now, you're a Western Pennsylvania guy, which is right in the heart of
that, yeah.
all of that drilling, and the AFL, we just had Rick Bloomingdale strongly supports that. Do you have any overall concerns about the natural gas industry itself, or are you reasonably content with the way it's developing?
I'm reasonably content with the way it's developing. I continue to have concerns about two parts of it, though. I still don't believe that we impose enough environmental issues, environmental precautions in the legislation. So I'd like to maybe go back and revisit that. But the second thing is the local control issue. I think that's real problematic for a lot of our communities. And that's
the courts.
In the courts right now that needs to be resolved. But I think if it's not resolved in the courts or needs to be, we need to come back.
You think locals should continue to have a major say in it?
I think that they should have a say in that conversation. To what degree, if it's a major say or having no say at all, I think is problematic to me. And I think to a lot of folks. And I think that's what needs to be addressed. But I think we'll come back to Marcellus at some point in time. But right now,
you never revisit any big issue too soon, I've noticed, in the legislature. You sort of wait a while, and maybe that's not unwise to see if it works, right?
I do think it's a wise choice. We've implemented the law. We allow it to play out. It's going through the court process. Now we have to move on to the other major issues we have to deal with.
All right, I'm talking with Senator Jay Costa. He's from Allegheny County. I'm going to talk with him about liquor privatization a bit and pensions. These are the other two big issues that confront the Pennsylvania legislature after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Welcome back to the program with Senator Jay Costa, Democrat from Allegheny County. Senator, let's talk about pensions first. I mean, $41 billion. Senator Brubaker suggested that it could be a lot higher, the pension debt. There is no doubt this is a serious matter that has to be dealt with. There are all sorts of ideas about how to do it. It seems like Democrats have one set and Republicans, something new, right? Democrats and Republicans have different views. If you were king for the day, what would you do to solve the pension crisis?
I would allow Act 120 of 2010 to play out.
Explain that.
Well, Act 120 was the steps that we took back in 2010 that significantly modified the benefits for new employees. Things like reducing the multiplier from 2.5% to 2%, addressing the issue of when they can retire, vesting period from 5 years, moving it to 10, the age from 60 to 65, implementing something called a shared risk concept, which first time has been introduced in Pennsylvania, and many other states don't have it as well, where the employee has a risk if the returns aren't what they need to be, then in that particular instance, the employee contributes more. We've not been faced with that.
The employee or the employer?
The employee would put more money in if the returns are not what they need to be. And so those steps need to take place. We also did some smoothing, and that's why we're at where we're at today. The governor has indicated that back in 2010, we would say for 5 years we would have collars on how much we would put into the system. Right. This year it's 4.5%, and roughly about $500 million. The fact of the matter is, if we just honor Act 120 and play it out over the course of years, the pension unfunded liability takes care of itself. In this particular instance, the governor in the budget proposal wants to reduce that collar from 4.5 down to 2.25, which results in about $175 to $200 million savings that he wants to spend now. And we're saying don't spend it now.
You know, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I mean, one of the problems, in addition to the stock market, collapse is too strong a word, maybe, because look what it's doing now, but it was that you all decided, not you personally, that you're not going to put any employer contribution rates in for 4 years. And by the way, I have to fess up, as a former professor at Millersville, a public university, I'm in the system. Now, they're not going to touch my pension. They've already said current retirees and current employees. Do we got that right, Senator?
Well, I didn't think that current retirees. I mean, there's still discussion about current employees. But you're exactly right, Terry. What happened over the course of the last 17 or 18 years or so, the employer failed to put in the requisite amount of money into the pension systems, and that's why we find ourselves in part where we're at. But to take it out on the employees, whether they be old employees, current employees, or retirees, is not appropriate.
But so Democrats and Republicans at least agree on the current benefits for people wouldn't be touched. The only debate is for current employees whether you would affect future benefits. I think that's what Republicans. Do I have that?
You are correct. You would lock down what you have up at this point in time and go from there.
You know, liquor privatization, hugely controversial issue. Democrats, for the most part, are against it. Republicans for it. Surprise, surprise here. We'd have some differences on this. Jim, give me Jay Costa's view about what should happen with privatization.
What we're against is the governor's proposal that expands liquor access to about 20,000 outlets across this Commonwealth and destroys the system and eliminates 5,000 good family-sustaining jobs. That's what we're opposed to. Senate Democrats, and I believe House Democrats, believe that we need to go a modernization route. The wine and spirit shops are not what they used to be in terms of how they operate. They operate far more significantly different and more successful as we go as they've been operating. We believe we need to do a modernization approach, which addresses issues like whether wine and spirits are being the accessibility of those things, trying to expand that. Modernization efforts along the lines of purchasing, how we deal with productivity, how we deal with pricing, being able to price differently. Also, package reform, beer package reform needs to...
Would you support then allowing distributors to sell smaller quantities in cases and maybe restaurants being able to sell a little more? You know,
that's part of the conversation that will take place over the course of the next couple of months. But Senate Democrats, through Senator Furlow's efforts, have put in a modernization plan that deals with those things we just talked about, as well as package reform and direct shipment of wine. We think that's the route we need to go, and not selling off our wine and spirit shops. Quite frankly, that will result in a loss of significant revenue to this Commonwealth as we go forward.
Now, the fact of the matter is that I've thought, and maybe you'll correct me, that the Senate itself has always expressed historically more reluctance to do this than the House.
That's accurate, yes.
All right. Point number two, we'll have to see what Republican leaders do throughout the course. Maybe I shouldn't ask you about what Republican leaders are going to do, but I asked them about what you're going to do, so it's only fair play. That, you know, there's going to be a lot of pressure to take this up in the Senate now. I mean, there's going to be huge pressure to do it. And the hybrid plan that now tries to walk both sides of the path a bit may entice more Republicans to sign on to this. Would that be your assessment as well?
I think there's no question we're going to have a dialogue precisely along those lines, where they're looking to do, there may be a compromise version that may come to light at some point in time, but I think those discussions will take place over the course of the next couple of months. But at the end of the day, there's been a great reluctance to do the privatization proposal that came from the House.
Not to interrupt you, but your point would be if there's privatization by getting rid of the LCB itself with the state-owned liquor stores, you would probably vote against the bill.
Yeah, I think the way it's been postured now, I would not be supporting it, nor do I think any of our members would support it. We have an excess of 25 members. In fact, we have 26 members of the Senate who support a modernization plan that I spoke about earlier. We think that's the right approach.
The last time I looked, you needed 26 votes. We're out of time, right?
All right,
Am I right to get a bill?
We think we have 26.
All right. Thanks, Senator. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.